I want to introduce you to a fellow hillbilly. Grew up dirt poor on the Ohio River and hated his father's tannery. Was better with a horse than with a ledger, and spent his whole life a little embarrassed that the world called him a genius, when he mostly just felt like a plain, stubborn man who told the truth. Went to school for 2 years just across the river from us, and then in Maysville, Kentucky. His people later put down roots in Covington, Kentucky. And 40 years after the fact, in the last months of his life, dying of throat cancer, broke, racing a pen against the calendar to leave his family something to live on. He wrote the most honest thing any American general has ever put on paper about his own war, although Smedley Butler did something similar. His name was Ulysses S. Grant, and what he confessed in his own hand was this: the war he'd fought as a young lieutenant was one of the most unjust ever waged by a stronger against a weaker nation. And that very war, he said, was the seed of the Civil War that nearly tore this country in half. Tonight, this afternoon, a hillbilly's general is reckoning with his own government and what it costs a man to say the quiet part out loud. Y'all, it's that time. Let's go.
Standing for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Built upon the shoulders of the Constitution, rule of law, and the animating principle that we are all created equal. I need to hear a hallelujah, though I'm not considered a believer by some. I still believe in the warmth of heaven come. I need the rapture I feel when my feet touch the green, green grass of home. Then I know I have reached the valley of kingdom come.
All right, y'all, welcome to the Hillbilly Think Tank with Spencer Keck. I am the educated hillbilly, and no, that's not an oxymoron. Don't call me a moron. There have been educated, erudite, and emancipated hillbillies right here in Kentucky ever since my kith and kin came through the Cumberland Gap with Daniel Boone and the Long Hunters on their quest for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they wanted to find that right here, and they found it and built it right here. Now, I am, like Spencer Keck, retired Navy doc, combat veteran, currently public school teacher, and a candidate for magistrate on the Hardin County Fiscal Court, District 3. And here today, I'm going to give you one soldier's honesty across 150 years. Our fellow hillbilly, segment 1. Let me make my case for Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, as one of ours, because I mean it as more than a joke. Part of my hillbilly bone is that I have wanderlust, just like Ulysses S. Grant said he did. I've been studying Ulysses S. Grant's life and writings ever since I watched a documentary on him from the History Channel last week with my 14-year-old. Now, Monday, I was traveling to Amelia, Ohio for some auction where I procured some gear from, and I saw signs saying U.S. Grant birthplace and childhood home were nearby. I realized I was just across the Ohio River from Maysville, Kentucky. And then I recalled that Grant was of Scots-Irish stock and recognized I was in the hillbilly edges of Ohio and Appalachian Kentucky. All of a sudden, the amazing Grant made sense. He was born in 1822 in Point Pleasant, Ohio, a speck of a river town, southwestern Ohio, close enough to Kentucky to spit across the water, right across that Ohio River. His father, Jesse, was a tanner, turned animal hides into leather for a living. And young Ulysses despised the smell and the work of its whole boyhood. He'd rather break a horse than tan a hide, and he was famous among his neighbors for it. Now, from the autumn of 1836 to the spring of 1838, Jesse sent him across the river to board at a school in Maysville, Kentucky, the school of Richardson and Rand, before he finished out at a Presbyterian academy in Ripley, Ohio, and then went on to West Point. And here's the piece that closes the circle for us. In 1853, Jesse and Hannah Grant pulled up stakes and moved south of the river for good to Covington, Kentucky, where Jesse expanded into wholesale leather. And he became was the wholesale leather trade and became, by several accounts, the single richest man in the Commonwealth. Now, Grant didn't grow up that way, though. Now, President Andrew Johnson made him Covington's postmaster in 1866. Then President U.S. Grant renominated his own father for a second term in 1870. When the general came home from the war, the whole town of Covington turned out for a victory reception at the Oddfellows Hall. And when Jesse died in 1873, he died a Kentuckian on Greenup Street. Now, here's the fun wrinkle, and I promised you to be honest in every version, and to give you the honesty, not the tidy one. Some folks call Grant Scotch-Irish hillbilly stock, and that's half true. His mother, Hannah Simpson, came from a Scots-Irish Presbyterian lineage. Their family was straight out of County Tyrone, Ireland. Hillbilly through and through. Our kind of people. But his father's, Grant's line, goes clean back to a Puritan named Matthew Grant, who stepped off of a ship at Plymouth in 1630 and helped settle Windsor, Connecticut. So the man who beat the Confederacy was, near as I can figure, half Scots-Irish hill folk and half Mayflower Yankee, which honestly, it might be the most American combination that there is. Now, y'all, next segment, the war he fought and hated. Now to the war itself and the young man who fought in 1846. Lieutenant Grant was quartermaster of the 4th U.S. Infantry. 1,000 men's worth of supply wagons and mules were his responsibility when Washington ordered General Zachary Taylor's army 130 miles south to the Rio Grande, in a territory Mexico had never considered as ours. Grant fought in nearly every major engagement of that war: Palo Alto, Resaca de la Palma, the brutal house-to-house fighting at Monterrey, where he galloped, hanging off the side of his horse for cover through streets full of enemy fire to fetch ammunition, and rode back right through it again. At Chapultepec, outside Mexico City, he ordered his men to haul a disassembled howitzer piece by piece up into a church steeple, reassembled it, and blasted open a gate for the whole assault. He earned 2 battlefield promotions for that kind of courage. Now, y'all, and through every mile of it, he believed that the war was wrong. Not later, not with hindsight only, at the time. 40 years on, dying, he set it down for good. I was bitterly opposed to the measure, and to this day regard the war, which resulted, as one of the most unjust ever waged by a stronger, against a weaker nation. It was an instance of a republic following the bad example of European monarchies in not considering justice and their desire to acquire additional territory. Man, let's sit with that. A general describing his own country's war as monarchy dressed up in Republican clothes. Y'all can't get better than this. Next segment, the conspiracy he named and where it led. Now, first off, if you haven't had a chance to watch that History Channel, I really encourage you to. 3-part series. Just absolutely amazing. Blew me away. So that's the one that I would like us to, if I can cue it up, hear about. But we'll come back to that. All right. So the conspiracy he named and where it led. But Grant didn't stop at unjust. He went further and named exactly why in words so clear they could be run straight in tomorrow's paper. Texas, he wrote, had belonged to Mexico, sparsely settled until American colonists arrived under Mexican permission. And in his words, these colonists introduced slavery into the state almost from the start, though the Constitution of Mexico did not, nor does it now, sanction that institution. So they set up their own government, seceded from Mexico once they felt strong enough, and then, his words again, offered themselves and the state to the United States. And here is the sentence that I really want tattooed on the wall of every state house in this country. The occupation, separation, and annexation were, from the inception of the movement to its final consummation, a conspiracy to acquire territory out of which slave states might be formed for the American Union. Not a policy disagreement, not a border dispute. A conspiracy, his words, to manufacture new slave states from a territory. They're all wrapped up in the flag. And then he drew the line all the way to the war that made him famous. The Southern Rebellion was largely the outgrowth of the Mexican War, he wrote. Nations, like individuals, are punished for their transgressions. We got our punishment in the most sanguinary and expensive war of modern times. Of course, if I was in my English literature class, I would explain to the kids that sanguinary means very, very bloody. So to him, that war, the Mexican-American War, was basically our just payback for the Mexican-American War. That is his words from his memoirs. And that really strikes me to the bone. You know, this man had amazing vision. And I really think you're going to be amazed by what led him to this. So, all right. And elsewhere, plainly, without hedging, the cause of the greatest war of the rebellion against the United States will have to be attributed to slavery. His words exactly. The man who commanded the armies that finally ended slavery looked back at his own government's first land grab and said, "This is where the bill started running. We took Texas to grow slavery. Growing slavery broke the Union. Breaking the Union cost 600,000 American lives, including nearly all the men he'd commanded. A conspiracy for territory, paid for in a generation later in blood." Next segment. the confession about himself. Now, here's the part of the story that makes Grant not a monument, but a man. And it's the part that I respect absolutely the most. And it's the part that is sticking with me. Because you remember, of course, he went on to become our president for 2 terms after Andrew Johnson. So he didn't just indict his government, he indicted himself. Late in life, reflecting on that war, he said this, and I want you to sit with the plainness of it. There was never a more wicked war. I thought so at the time, only I had not moral courage enough to resign. Read that twice. Because remember, he's an officer, so officers can resign their commission. A man who charged through gunfire at Monterrey to fetch ammunition, who was, by every account, one of the bravest soldiers this country ever produced, tells you in his own hand that the courage he lacked wasn't the courage to face a bullet. It was the courage to face his own government and say, no, not this. That is the hardest honesty there is, friends, harder than any battlefield. It's easy to admire physical courage. We build statues to it. It's much rarer to hear a decorated general admit that he swallowed his conscience and did his duty anyway, and that the swallowing of his conscience haunted him for 40 years. He didn't pretend the uniform made it right. He just told you plainly, I knew better and I marched anyway. Now, I marched anyway, and that's on me too. You know, as a combat veteran myself, I hear of fellow warriors today admit that duty and conscience aren't always the same thing. We know this. And I respect him more, not less, for saying so. I watch my fellow veterans on YouTube channels every day, and every day, more and more of us are coming to grips with the fact of how much we loved the adventure, we loved the adrenaline rush, and we absolutely loved the Brotherhood of Warriors. But we now look back as mature men and wonder in amazement at how willingly we were used as pawns of the military-industrial complex that never enriched us, but inflated the stocks and bonds of many a Wall Street investor and trader. Now, next segment, the echo, my own generation's confession. And like I said, my generation, we're coming to terms with this. And it's tough to come to terms with something so unsettling. So now I want to bring Grant's own confession forward 160 years, because I did not pick this story out of a history book at random when I woke up this morning. Nope. I hear, like I said, his exact sentiments and his exact feeling, word for word, from my own brothers and sisters in arms, combat veterans of Desert Storm, of Iraq, of Afghanistan, and I feel it myself. Here's the parallel, plain and documented. American sons and daughters were sent into Iraq in 2003 on the strength of a claim that Saddam Hussein was trying to buy yellowcake uranium from Niger in Africa to build a nuclear weapon. That claim rested on documents that the International Atomic Energy Agency examined, and within weeks of the invasion, declared obvious forgeries. Bad letterhead, forged signatures, a reference to a Nigerian constitution that had been amended years before the documents claimed to be signed. Not disputed, forged. And afterwards, 2 separate bipartisan investigations, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, Republicans and Democrats together, and the Rob Silberman Commission, appointed by President Bush himself, Both concluded the intelligence supporting the broader case for Iraqi weapons of mass destructions were deeply flawed. And when it was finally over, the Iraq Survey Group searched the entire country and found no weapons of mass destruction program to speak of. That's not a talking point. If anybody wants to try to tell you it is, they are highly mistaken. It's not a talking point. This is now well-founded fact. So, we know that we were lied to, right? We know, like I said, when it was finally over, the official bipartisan finding of the United States government about its own war, and here's the part that touches men who served in the halls of power, not just the halls of Congress. The record shows that Vice President Cheney's office, which included Scooter Libby, along with Karl Rove going in and out, pushed hard on that Niger claim, even as the CIA had doubts. And when a former ambassador named Joseph Wilson went public saying he'd found no evidence for it, the vice president's chief of staff, Louis Scooter Libby, was convicted by a federal jury in 2007 of perjury and obstruction of justice for lying to investigators about how his wife's identity as a covert CIA officer got leaked to the press, widely understood at the time as a retaliation for Wilson's dissent. His prison sentence was commuted by President Bush. Scooter Libby's prison sentence was commuted by President Bush. He was later fully pardoned by President Trump in 2018. Get that now. Karl Rove, President Bush's senior political advisor and his political mastermind that got him elected to governor of Texas and to president, testified to that same grand jury 4 times, but was never charged with anything. Of course, now we know he's making good money on Fox News. I tell you, the verdict's precisely because precision is the whole point of this show. One conviction on process charges, later pardoned, not a courtroom conspiracy verdict against everyone whose names gets mentioned in that story. But you did not need an unprovable conspiracy charge when 2 bipartisan government investigations already told you on the record that the case for that war was built purely on sand. So when I say we were bamboozled, I'm not reaching for a metaphor at all. We raised our hands, we swore an oath, and went to fight and bleed and bury friends, in my case, brother, over a threat that the intelligence didn't support and the weapons never existed to justify. Grant at Monterrey and Chapultepec believed the same thing about his own war while he was still fighting it. We believed it about ours while we were still fighting it too. And plenty of us have said so ever since, all over social media, on the veteran-run channels where OEF and OIF vets and plenty of Gulf War vets as well sit down and just talk about what we saw and what we were told. It's become its own kind of town hall, and it should be. We earned the right to that conversation. That right was earned in a sanguinary manner, as Ulysses S. Grant said, meaning we earned it in blood. And we should never, ever forget that. And no one should try to shut us down.
Ammunition! Ammo! Volunteers! Volunteer. Grant, you're the quartermaster. You don't need to do this. You have to volunteer. Volunteers.
So volunteer. Yeah, we volunteered because we love our country. Now, like I said, we earned the right to that conversation. We watch and listen to reports on the TV, on the internet, and from our friends still in uniform. We see whose sons and daughters will never put on a United States infantry uniform and get sand and blood in their combat boots. But those same sons and daughters are killing it in petroleum stocks, killing it in AI developed for combat, and killing it in drone production as well as missile production. And that is exactly why so many of us are watching this moment with our stomachs in a knot. Right now, American forces have carried out a military intervention in Venezuela that ended with the capture of that country's leader, but no change in what we are told by war hawks is a corrupt regime. American strikes continue in and around Iran right now, in and on, off and on and off again. It's an off again, an on again war that you've heard me cover on this show. And just this past week at the NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey, the president dragged Greenland back into the headlines again, telling reporters flatly that the Danish territory should be controlled by the United States, not by Denmark. And going further, we took Greenland and then stupidly we gave it back. We shouldn't have given it back to them because we're the ones that need it. He said it while sitting next to NATO's own Secretary General. And in the same breath, he named exactly the two grievances rattling around in his head altogether. I'm not happy with NATO because of what they did with Greenland, and I'm not happy with NATO because they didn't want to help us with the number one state sponsor of terror. That's Iran. Out of his own mouth, friends, Greenland and Iran, two different countries, two different continents, tied into a single complaint about an ally who wouldn't fall in line. Denmark's prime minister answered plainly, Greenland is not for sale, and Denmark will defend every inch of NATO, including its own territory. And once again, it was Finland's president, Alexander Stubb, who gave the sharpest, calmest answer of the bunch, reminding everyone that NATO already has 7 Arctic member nations, Finland among them, and that his country alone has trained 1 million soldiers for Arctic conditions. I want to be precise again. The president has so far stopped short of ordering force. And back in January, he even claimed to have struck a Greenland framework with NATO's Secretary General, a deal that months later still hasn't produced a single public detail. That pattern is worth noticing on its own. Big claims of an imminent deal, then silence, then the threat resurfaces at the next summit. It's the same 2 weeks rhythm we've learned to recognize from other headlines this year. Now, I want to be precise because that's my rule. Nobody has produced forged documents this time that I can point to and say, there, that's the lie. I'm not telling you these are reports of Iraq point for point. What I'm telling you is that combat veterans recognize a pattern before we recognize a document. The confident talk of easy threats, the thin public case, the sense that the real reasons are being kept from the people who will do the dying. We have learned and earned the right to be suspicious of that pattern because we paid for the last one in friends' names carved into granite. We do not want our children or the 18-year-olds signing up this month bamboozled the way that we were. Next segment, the callback, speed, back to James Speed, and the shape of honest men. And this pairs with something we talked about not long ago on this show. Remember there? I talked about James Speed of Louisville, Lincoln's Attorney General. Speed wasn't born perfect either. In 1862, he was a lone Kentucky senator who opposed Lincoln's preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, preferring a slower, gentler path. He grew past that. By 1864, he was a full advocate for abolition and equality. And by 1866, he resigned, the most powerful legal office in the country, rather than serve a president who turned on the freedmen. He would not turn his back on the freed slaves. Grant is cut from that same Kentucky adjacent cloth, a man who started somewhere short of where he ended up, who told the truth about his own shortcomings instead of hiding them, and who let his conscience keep growing his whole life instead of freezing it in place. That is the opposite of the way we do politics now, where admitting a mistake is treated like a mortal wound. Grant and Speed both understood something we've half forgotten. A man who says, "I was wrong, and here's exactly how," is not weaker for it. He's the only kind of leader worth trusting with anything. Which brings me back to the question that I posed today. I've got it down there in the comments. See, we got one commenter here. SOL in the house. Awesome. Thomas Theismann, good to see you. So my question today is, what's a mistake that took you years to admit? My mistake that took me years to admit. Well, I'll call it a mistake. Well, let's see. So on 9/11, I was actually with the Marines, 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit. We were in Darwin, Australia, training. We had just come out of the outback. And I went to watch a movie I had been eagerly anticipating. It was a movie that still to this day haunts me, and a book that haunts me by the same title, Captain Corelli's Mandolin. It is a historical fiction about a true story of when the World War II, when the Italians and then the Germans invaded the Greek Isles. I left it really shaken, thinking, man, not sure if I'm going to ever re-enlist again after I finished that tour. It was going to be up after that deployment. I was wavering between being a pacifist, like I thought Jesus Christ and Buddha and others had taught about. But then a few hours later, 9/11 happened. And I thought to myself, the only time that I believe in that type of action as I went into then is when the country's back is against the wall and its people are threatened. But I was at that point of, really considering things the way that Grant says he was right here when he was in Mexico in the U.S.-Mexican War. All right, y'all. So that's what I got in the comments there. What's a mistake you've made that took you years to admit out loud? I guess another mistake I made was getting both of my younger brothers to join the military with me, because one of them, like I said before, he's gone now due to his service, along with both of my younger brothers were together in the same unit when one got blown up. All right, y'all. So continuing on, let's bring it home to Hardin County. Bring it home because Grant's confession, it's not a museum piece. It's a standard. And it's the standard my fellow veterans and I are demanding out loud right now. We spent a lot of episodes on this show asking hard questions about wars fought on shaky pretexts, about leaders who won't admit what the intelligence actually showed, about the gap between what we're told and what's true. Grant is the proof that the right answer to that gap has always been available and it isn't complicated. Tell the truth about the war, even if you fought it. Tell the truth about the vote, even if you cast it. Tell the truth about the mistake, even if it's yours. And tell it before the bodies come home, not 40 years and a deathbed later. We want humble, competent leaders just like Grant. Men who fought bravely, then told the truth about what they've been sent to do. We want a government that shows its work in the open, the way 2 bipartisan investigations eventually showed theirs on Iraq. Not backroom certainty followed by another generation's confession. That's not treason to your uniform or your party. Grant wore the uniform faithfully for 2 more years after Mexico and became the general who saved the Union. Truth-telling and loyalty, they were never actually in conflict, y'all. Only cowardice makes them look that way. In my case, if you elect me as magistrate in District 3 here in Hardin County, I will make every vote in the fiscal court a vote I will own up to, as my standard is. Say it plainly, even when it costs you. That's the whole difference between a public servant and a career politician. I'm running for magistrate on that same simple, unglamorous virtue. When I'm wrong, I'll say so in the room, on the record, not 40 years and a deathbed later, but now, while it can still do some good. A hillbilly from the Ohio Valley taught this whole country that lesson from his own deathbed. The least we can do down here in his old stomping grounds, and the least Washington can do for the next generation being asked to ship out to wherever that map points next, is not need 40 years to learn it ourselves. And y'all, man, like I say, I was there in Australia when that attack happened. First in country with the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit afterwards. And that still, to this day, yep, it's our reckoning we've got to come with. That was used later to make a lot of people richer. And here we go again.
Standing for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, built upon the shoulders of the Constitution, rule of law, and the animating principle that we are all created equal. I need to hear a hallelujah, though I am not considered a believer by some. I still believe in the warmth of heaven come.
All right, y'all. Now, if you can see right back here, so impressed by him that he's now somebody I'm putting on back here on my wall. Might even put him on the wall. Actually, I will put him on the wall in my classroom. Amazing guy. I've had his bottle up there for a while, kind of as a reference. Supposedly, he drank Old Crow. So, General Grant, here's to you. Y'all, I'm Spencer Keck, the Educated Hillbilly, and this has been the Hillbilly Think Tank. Come to a fiscal court meeting. Bring your hardest question, whether they earn your vote or not, I'll answer it. I'll see you there. Keep thinking deeply, and remember, in Kentucky, united we stand, divided we fall. That isn't just words on a flag, it's the glue that holds us together. Because if we love our neighbors as ourselves and recognize that, yes, we are our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper, then we cannot be divided and we will not fall. Remember, everyone deployed overseas. And as I reported earlier, Monday, the military admitted one more person has died in this hot zone. And bless your corazón, that is Spanish for heart. Well, I see I got a couple more comments before I completely close off here. And it's so good again to see Thomas Liesman in the house, SOL in the house. We got Whaler47 saying, hey, bro, I enjoyed your stream. I had some suggestions I want to share with you, but I don't want to spam your chat. Let's chat on. Add me on Discord. Okay. Alrighty. So, again, Thomas, thanks for tuning in. And y'all, Keep on keeping on. Think deeply. Keep them honest. Have a great rest of the week. We're at hump day now, aren't we? Yep. Here we go.
Standing for life, liberty, in the pursuit of happiness, built upon the shoulders of the Constitution, rule of law and the animating principle that we are all created equal. I need to hear a hallelujah. Though I'm not considered a believer by some, I still believe in the warmth of heaven come. I need the rapture I feel when my feet touch the green, green grass of home. Then I know I have reached the valley of kingdom come. And when I reach that valley, I need to see you there. Because we don't need a kingdom, we only need freedom. And we don't seek a king, we seek the brotherhood of man. And we won't fight for bondage, as we need no king or woman. We will stand undivided, because we will raise the fallen. Now I need to hear a hallelujah as we tear down the wall. The divide between heaven and earth is tears turn to mirth as we walk through the valley of death. And I draw my last breath. I know rapture I feel when I touch the green, green grass of home. Then I know I have reached the hollow where my ancestors roam. I have seen the dream of MLK come true. I have seen Martin's dream of justice alive and world when at Thanksgiving my family sits down to break bread together with folks of many different races, ethnicities, religions. My family sees Martin's dream and we only judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have seen the dream of MLK come true. I have trusted my life in the hands of many a black brother, a brown brother, and an immigrant brother in the military, and they have saved my life. Countless times I saw Martin's dream alive, and well, many times my destiny was tied with my brother's destiny. As we served our American dream in combat overseas, we did not care what color of skin our warrior brothers had, what adult sexual partner our warrior brothers had, or what religion they practiced or did not practice. Martin said, it must not lead us to distrust all white people from many of our white brothers. As evidenced by their presence here today, I've come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. I have tasted the bittersweet taste of freedom as I held wounded warriors of America, both in battle and when they returned home for treatment. I knew then and I know now, freedom is not cheap, but I heard it ring loud and clear. Even after the battle smoke cleared, this made true to me what Martin said. When we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every city and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, great God Almighty, we are free at last. Oh, brothers and sisters, I have seen the dream. The dream made us so great. Why would we shut out this dream from our midst now? I was told by another leader that America is the land of opportunity, but we see these opportunities dying with our dreams. Why, America? Why would we let the dream die when we were near the top of the mountain and had the whole world wanting to be us? Brothers and sisters, it is so much better to be loved and respected. That is real power. Now, we want to be the feared bully of our own people and other nations. In the past, I heard fools say they hate us because they ain't us. Now I say the rest of the world doesn't want to be us anymore. The rest of the world thinks we have lost our mind and we are the dangerous neighbors that will rob them in their sleep. This is not Martin's dream. Oh, brothers and sisters, I have seen the dream. The dream made us so great. I have seen the dream of MLK come true. I've seen Martin's dream of justice alive and well. When at the dawn's early light, I heard freedom ring. Come all ye children, sing. We must hear freedom ring. This is my American dream. Free at last, great God Almighty, we are free at last.
My father left me two things, his rosary and a debt. That debt was not money. It was the price of keeping our name out of the gutter and our heads above the
beans were used to ship them cross country on refrigerated trucks. And third, they take longer to cook than modern bush beans. In the 50s and 60s, convenience became king, and TV did it. Soaking overnight got made but here's what they didn't tell you. Old-fashioned means it actually works. Your great-grandfather didn't grow scallop runners because they were tender. He grew them because when the bank foreclosed on farms across the